Hi everyone. So first of all, thanks for all the work so far. And this presentation is going to be about the post-rebuttal discussion. And so first, a quick overview of where we are. Right now, we are doing the post-rebuttal discussion with the tertiaries. This is what this presentation will be about. And this is the last step before going into the program committee meeting. During the discussion phase, you have a few things to do. First, you have to read the rebuttal and all the reviews. You have to actively lead the discussion. You have to make sure the evaluation is consistent with the guidelines and across all the submissions. You have to invite an extra committee member if needed. And at the end, you have to wrap up the discussion. So the first point is that the discussion happened on linked links, not on Slack, because the tertiaries are not on Slack. Also, you can start the discussion right away. You do not have to wait for the primary to do that. Make sure to post a summary of the main points. And later, if the discussion becomes very specific about a point in particular, you can bring it back to the general topic to make sure that all the points are covered during the discussion. It's really important to encourage the tertiaries to participate. This is our last chance to hear from them. And if they change their mind, ask them to update their reviews in linked links. Even more important, we have to make sure that we are friendly to new ideas. So if someone is really excited about a paper, encourage them to champion. Make space in the discussion for them to defend their opinion and make their case. And it's important to remember to adapt our expectation to the originality of the work. A grand idea may not require as much validation as a refinement of a well-known approach. It is important that we apply the same evaluation criteria to all the submissions. I shared guidelines about these criteria, and a few of them have generated some discussions. It's important that we apply them consistently. For instance, you can comment on the page count, but please do not penalize papers that are too long. The paper length should not prevent a great idea from being published. Do not penalize papers that are available as pre-publication, for instance on archive. The submission policy now allows pre-publications. Do not penalize papers without code or data. There are valid reasons for not sharing code and data. Independently of code and data availability, there should always be enough information for the paper to be reproducible. And when asking for a comparison, provide a link to the code and data for that comparison. If the code and data is not available, consider asking for a qualitative discussion instead. We also have to take into account that it has been difficult for everyone to work due to COVID. So we have to consider alternatives to experiments that would go against COVID guidelines. For instance, equipment and lab may not be accessible, and in-person studies may not be possible. We also have to keep in mind that user studies may have to be done remotely, which means that controlling the protocol can be challenging, and fewer people may be available. We also have to apply a consistent policy for prior work. Papers published after January 28 should be considered concurrent work. For instance, CVPR 2021 is concurrent work, but SIGGRAPH 2020 is prior work. But we should also look at the calendar. There was a bit more than a month between SIGGRAPH 2020 and the SIGGRAPH deadline this year, which means that some tasks were difficult. For instance, it was difficult to run a user study or retrain a model, and we should take that into account in our evaluation. We receive reviews that are inconsistent with these guidelines. Here's what to do when you find one. First, mention the inconsistency in the discussion on linked links. Then remind the guidelines and ask that the rest of the discussion follows the guidelines. Also make note of that review, and later, in the summary review, write that the inconsistency was corrected during the discussion. It's also clear that there will always be challenging special cases. In that case, send a note to Leona so that I can have a look if I'm not conflicted, and also be ready to discuss it during the committee meeting. At any point, you can add an extra committee member if you need additional expertise, or if you need another point of view because reaching consensus is challenging. Add extras early so that they have time to read the paper and possibly write a review. Before the end of the discussion, make sure that the tertiaries clearly state their position, and encourage them to update their review if they change their recommendation. You can also update your review if needed. Enter your consensus recommendation in LinkedIn before March 22 at 22 GMT. You can choose between accept, top 10%, accept, reject, and table. Accept top 10% will help me select the papers highlighted in the press release. Table means that no consensus was reached. The paper will be discussed during the meeting. An extra is likely going to be useful if you do not have one already. Also, a quick reminder about the communication. General topics are okay to discuss with everyone, but paper-specific topics can only be discussed with the other program committee member without checking. If you need to talk to someone else, first check with Leona. I'm personally conflicted with many papers, so do not contact me directly. Check with Leona first. Also, check Slack often. There are useful discussions happening in there. So thanks again for all your work. And if there's one last word I would like you to remember is to be open to new ideas.